There's a reason old money never yells. When you've inherited wealth, power, and property lines older than most countries, you learn to keep your voice down. But in a world where nothing is supposed to go wrong, every crack becomes deafening.
You bored me to tears. I was playing a scene with you.
You love me.
You met your match in me, you suburban stud. I was acting.
This is what happens when the illusion of control slips, quietly, elegantly, and all at once. The swimmer follows Ned Merrill, a tanned, charming man in a Speedo, who decides one afternoon to swim his way home through every backyard pool in his upscale suburb. At first, it feels whimsical, like something out of a dreamy summer memory. But as he moves from yard to yard, party to party, the atmosphere starts to shift. The smiles fade, the jokes get awkward, the neighbors grow cold. Every pool reveals something Ned doesn't want to admit, and something the people around him already know. By the end, he's not just swimming home, he's swimming backward through time, through debts, affairs, betrayals, and lies he spent years trying to forget. The final scene isn't a return, it's a reckoning. The movie feels like an American fairy tale until you realize it's a horror story, one about denial, about the way wealth and charm can camouflage ruin. Behind the scenes, the illusion was just as fragile. Burt Lancaster may have looked like an Olympic swimmer, but he was terrified of water. He hired an Olympic coach, trained obsessively, and even paid out of pocket to extend shooting days just to keep the illusion alive. Joan Rivers, in her first film role, shot a 7-minute scene over 7 days, all while the director and star argued endlessly about how her character should behave. Another image of suburban grace cracking from within. The original director Frank Perry was fired during post-production. Sidney Pollack came in to rework scenes, adjust the tone, and glue the fragments together. Even the producer took his name off the final cut. The entire film was stitched together like the fragments of Ned's memory. Sharp, surreal, disjointed. By the time Ned gets to his final pool, rain falling, doors locked, you understand the title wasn't about swimming, it was about sinking. In a place where everything looks polished and perfect, you don't see the drowning until it's already over. Barry Lyndon follows Redmond Barry, a poor Irish nobody with good cheekbones who decides the best way to survive 18th century Europe is by faking it until he makes it. He duels a man for love, deserts 2 armies, scams his way through aristocratic poker tables, and eventually marries into a cold English dynasty where everyone looks like they've been embalmed in candlelight. It's a rise and fall story, told with such composure, it feels like you're watching it from inside a museum, until you realize the velvet and powdered wigs are just a very soft cage. Stanley Kubrick wanted every frame of the film to look like an oil painting, and he didn't mean that metaphorically. He used custom-built NASA lenses, originally designed for photographing the dark side of the moon, so he could shoot entire scenes by candlelight. The result is hypnotic and unreal, but it came at a price. Marisa Berenson, who plays Lady Lyndon, was forbidden from getting a tan during filming. Kubrick didn't want sunlight touching her. Her melancholy paleness wasn't makeup, it was enforced. Kubrick was so obsessed with control, he even dictated how theaters should show the film. He mailed projectionists detailed letters about lighting, sound levels, and intermission music, making sure the audience experience stayed as embalmed as the characters. The shoot itself was chaotic. Kubrick had to flee Ireland after the IRA got wind that British soldiers were being used as extras. Meanwhile, his dream project, a Napoleon biopic, had just fallen apart, so Barry Lyndon became his second-choice obsession, powered by the leftover research of a movie he never got to make. There's a reason this world of silk and etiquette feels so lifeless. It's designed to be perfect, not human. And like Barry, you don't see the trap until you're already wearing the costume. The Last of Sheila sounds like a beachside murder mystery, and it is, but it's also the kind of party only the rich and bitter could invent. A Hollywood producer invites his closest frenemies aboard his Mediterranean yacht for a week of sun, games, and guilt tripping. Each night, they play a game involving someone's secret. One card reads, shoplifter. Another says, ex-convict. One of them says, hit-and-run killer. Then the host ends up dead, and suddenly the game stops being cute. The script was co-written by Stephen Sondheim and Anthony Perkins, 2 Broadway guys who spent their off nights designing real-life scavenger hunts for their high society friends. This movie is basically what would have happened if one of those games spiraled into a homicide. James Coburn, who plays the dead producer, brought his personal manservant to the set. Diane Cannon, who initially thought it was a creepy power move, ended up hiring the guy for a full-body massage and bath at her house. If that's not old money energy, I don't know what is. The cast: Raquel Welch, James Mason, Ian McShane was a cocktail of rising stars and veterans, all playing thinly veiled versions of actual Hollywood types. Cannon's character was based on real-life talent agent Sue Mengers. The film was shot on a real yacht, using real Mediterranean light, with real people whose secrets were sometimes not all that fictional. That gives the film its unease, not just the mystery, but the sense that everyone's pretending even when the camera isn't rolling. Casino looks like a movie about Vegas glamour, but it's really about watching a man build a kingdom out of sand, then stab himself trying to hold it together. Sam Rothstein, played by Robert De Niro, is a gambling genius sent by the mob to run the Tangiers casino. Everything's smooth until he falls in love with Ginger, a grifter with expensive taste and an ex-boyfriend who won't go away. Joe Pesci plays the childhood friend you should never introduce to your business partners. The film is based on a true story. Frank Lefty Rosenthal ran casinos for the Chicago outfit, and his life was even messier than what Scorsese put on screen. Joe Pesci stayed in character offset, which means people were genuinely nervous around him. Sharon Stone fainted filming her courtroom withdrawal scene. She earned an Oscar nomination and said working with De Niro ruined her for any future co-stars. The production had to move over $1 million in real cash between the set and the bank each day. There were armed guards, surveillance, and daily money counts like a reverse heist that kept repeating. Scorsese also cast actual Vegas gamblers and ex-mob guys as extras. One real-life hitman worked as an advisor. Meanwhile, the friendship between De Niro and Pesci became strained during filming, mirroring the imploding relationship between Ace and Nicky. It's not a crime movie. It's a cautionary tale about what happens when you mistake control for power and think that money buys loyalty. In Vegas, nothing lasts. Not the casino, not the marriage, not the empire. 6 degrees of separation is what happens when charm enters through the front door and truth slips out the back. A polished young man named Paul shows up at a Fifth Avenue apartment, bleeding slightly, wearing a fine suit, and claiming to be Sidney Poitier's son. The couple who lives there, Witza and Flan Kittredge, are New York art collectors, socially polished, mildly bored, and entirely susceptible. Paul's story is airtight. A Harvard classmate of their kids, stranded after a mugging, eager to crash just for the night. They give him dinner, they give him their couch. He gives them purpose, briefly, and then, like all good lies, it unravels fast. Paul is a con artist, charming his way through the city's elite by offering exactly what they want, someone who speaks their language, flatters their sensibilities, and never asks for too much until he does. Will Smith plays Paul in one of his earliest serious roles. This was back when he was still the Fresh Prince, and the studio was nervous. Smith refused to kiss another man on camera, as the script originally demanded. The scene stayed but was reworked with a camera trick, still controversial at the time, still discussed today. Stockard Channing, who plays Wee Suh, brought her Broadway version of the character to the screen, earning an Oscar nomination for giving depth to a woman waking up from the narcotic of money and manners. The film is based on real events, pulled from the true story of David Hampton, who scammed his way into Upper East Side apartments in the 80s with nothing but confidence and a borrowed last name. When the play premiered, Hampton showed up in person, asking actors for loans, turning the satire into a live performance. It's that kind of story, the kind where the fakery isn't just in the script, it's baked into the walls, the city, the conversations. Everyone is someone else, and the closer you are to the top, the easier it is to lie your way in. Dangerous Liaisons is a film about rich people weaponizing boredom. In pre-revolution France, where wealth means never needing to look busy, the Marquise de Merteuil and the Vicomte of Aumont turned seduction into a competitive blood sport. Their victims are other nobles, carefully chosen for their virtue or vanity, depending on which weakness is easier to exploit. The game is simple: take someone pure and ruin them. The motive? Amusement, revenge, maybe both. Glenn Close plays the Marquise like a woman who's read every etiquette book and decided to use them as war manuals. John Malkovich is Valmont, whose reputation is a cocktail of whispered rumors and ruined reputations. The performances are cold, precise, and devastating. But behind all the powdered wigs and candlelight is a film that's been engineered down to the bone. Frater's direction pulls you into the drawing rooms and doesn't let you leave. Glenn Close wore corsets so tight they left bruises. Uma Thurman, just 19 at the time, filmed some of the most difficult scenes of her early career in what she later described as both terrifying and necessary. Malkovich and Close reportedly kept a kind of creative tension offset that made its way into their performances. The costumes won an Oscar, the production design got its own applause, but what lingers is how the film looks like a painting and feels like a knife. Old money here is not just corrupt, it's corrosive, peeling the humanity off anyone who plays the game too long. Reversal of Fortune is a courtroom drama where no one acts innocent. Klaus von Bülow is accused of attempting to murder his wife Sunny twice by injecting her with insulin, leaving her in a coma. The facts are foggy, the emotions are cold, and the public already has its verdict. He looks guilty. Klaus doesn't try to fix that. Jeremy Irons plays him with the kind of detached arrogance that makes you lean in closer just to make sure he's human. Sunny, played by Glenn Close, narrates the entire film from her coma. She's in every scene and never moves. The storytelling choice is eerie, brilliant, and a perfect mirror to the film's central question: when the surface looks calm, what's boiling underneath? The movie adapts Alan Dershowitz's real legal memoir, and he appears in the film too, as an appellate judge during the courtroom scenes. The defense team, portrayed by Ron Silver and a young Felicity Huffman, is based on real law students, including one Elliot Spitzer, who would later become governor of New York. The movie was shot in real Gilded Age mansions, including the Breakers in Rhode Island, while deliberately avoiding Clarendon Court, the actual Von Bülow estate. That distance gave the production space to build its own mythology. When Jeremy Irons met the real Claus years later, Von Bülow jokingly asked if he was planning to play any more of Dershowits's clients. It's that kind of story where satire, scandal, and tragedy live together under one roof with the blinds drawn tight. The Great Gatsby follows a man who believes elegance can resurrect the past. Jay Gatsby lives like a myth just outside New York City, hosting orchestras and strangers in his cathedral of a home, all to lure back Daisy Buchanan, the soft-voiced ghost of his youth. Played by Robert Redford, at his most composed, Gatsby glows with the calm delusion of someone who thinks effort can undo time. But everything around him, his shirts, his parties, even his name, is borrowed shine. Mia Farrow's Daisy is all surface and silk, her charm flickering like candlelight before a storm. Nick Carraway watches from the wings, unsure whether he's documenting a tragedy or just another party that ends in daylight. The 1974 adaptation devotes itself to texture, tailored suits, Art Deco furniture, and mansions on loan from real Gilded Age dynasties. Director Jack Clayton tried to balance visual grandeur with emotional ache, but the production was famously rocky. Truman Capote was fired from the screenplay early on. Farrow and Redford were said to clash, and the shoot struggled under the pressure of adapting a perfect novel into a perfect movie. Still, every frame feels like a perfume ad with a funeral underneath. This version doesn't chase realism, it leans into the fantasy Gatsby built for himself, then watches as it quietly collapses. The elegance is deliberate, even when it's empty. It's a movie about the weight of charm, the cruelty of memory, and what happens when you believe beauty can rewrite what's already been lost. The talented Mr. Ripley lingers like a good lie, confident, beautiful, and eventually fatal. Tom Ripley, played by Matt Damon with a kind of haunted politeness, is sent to Italy to retrieve the golden child Dickie Greenleaf. Jude Law's Dickie is tan, rich, and the human form of a summer yacht party. What begins as admiration turns to obsession, then to murder. Ripley doesn't just kill Dickie, he becomes him, slipping into his wardrobe and social calendar with such finesse, you almost forget what's missing. But shadows gather. Marge Gwyneth Paltrow grows suspicious, a friend ends up dead, and Tom's carefully managed dual identity begins to unravel. The film is as much about loneliness as it is about crime. Anthony Minghella built the movie around precision, costumes tailored to class, scenes staged like portraits, and performances that slide between affection and threat. Damon lost 30 pounds, learned to play piano, and sang live on set to channel Ripley's desperate need to impress. Law was told to stalk his co-stars off camera to embody Dickie's predatory charisma. The queer subtext unspoken in Patricia Highsmith's original novel is brought forward here, and with it, a complex portrayal of desire curdled by exclusion. Ripley's love for Dickie is real, but so is his rage. In a world where class is costume, Ripley becomes the most dangerous character of all, someone who doesn't inherit status but performs it better than the real thing. And he does it so well, it's almost hard to blame him. Metropolitan walks through Manhattan's winter streets with a borrowed coat and a lot to prove. The film follows Tom Townsend, a thoughtful outsider who stumbles into the orbit of Upper East Side debutantes during their seasonal swirl of tuxedos, cocktail parties, and midnight debates about Jane Austen. He isn't old money, he barely has money, but he does have opinions, and that's currency among the Sally Fowler Rat Pack, a group of well-read, overly self-aware rich kids who speak like they're rehearsing for a drawing room play. Whit Stillman, who wrote and directed it on a shoestring budget, builds the movie around late-night conversations, small betrayals, and the gentle erosion of pretense. There's no crime, no sex, no grand climax, just the slow reveal that charm can't cover everything. Stillman famously sold his own apartment to finance the film, and it shows this is personal, slightly homesick work. Scenes were shot without permits, including one at the Plaza Hotel, where the actors snuck in and filmed until security noticed. Most of the cast weren't actors at all. Stillman hired friends, acquaintances, and people from the neighborhood, which explains the uneven but deeply real rhythm of the dialogue. Metropolitan isn't mocking its characters even when they're being ridiculous. It's studying them like a dinner guest, who isn't quite welcome. The tension comes, not from scandal, but from the feeling that their world is already starting to fade, and they're too articulate to ignore it. This is what a coming-of-age movie looks like when the privilege is inherited, but the purpose isn't.